All right, so we have merch.
We do.
It has happened. And so we did a soft launch before this podcast came out, and we just like set it on Reddit and Twitter and things like that. So some people have checked it out. But this is like the hard launch. So you can go over to Teespring. There will be links in the show notes, and you can go check out some merch. And if you feel like supporting the show and being part of the community, you can go pick up some merch. I have added some new merch, which I think, Bill, you were unaware of.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so I deliberately wanted to keep it a surprise for you. So do you want to head on over to the store there, have a gander, and then maybe paint some visual pictures for people?
I would absolutely love to do that.
I would love nothing more. As for the older merch, the merch that initially launched, we have 2 T-shirts. There is the Coat of Arms T-shirt made by u/Coolmare in men and women's sizes, and then there's an Artifexian podcast logo T-shirt, men and women's sizes. And initially, they launched with like a teeny tiny logo in a sort of like football jersey sort of thing, like a little what would you call that? Like a little small thing on your pec. What do you call that sort of thing?
I'm kind of on the left side of your chest.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But I got a copy. I got sent some sample merch, and it didn't look quite right, so I blew it up into a big AP, red AP on a black shirt. Which nice. people were saying, they were kind of like, we want bigger design. So you wanted bigger, I gave you bigger. So those are the initial ones. And then, Bill, if you're there, do you want to run through the newer ones?
Well, I am looking at the shop now, and that is all I can see. So I'm going to scroll down, and cool.
What we got?
Okay, so we have a mug.
We have a mug. It was requested, much requested.
It was requested, yeah. So an Artifexian podcast logo mug. So is it a black background or is it a dark blue background?
Black. Their dark blue was not very good.
Okay. So a black background and then the red AP logo.
Mm-hmm.
Then the T-shirts, again, in various styles, reading Betamax Crinkle Dash.
I just had to. It had to happen. And it's done like the
Why, of all of the ridiculous things I've said, did you choose that one?
You need to keep up the ridiculous things, because we got to make merch out of the ridiculous things. Like there's definitely going to be Bill Polian merch coming real soon.
There better be.
Man, it is genuinely so much fun to turn these like podcast memes into T-shirts. I adore this process. It's so cool. Even if no one buys any of these shirts, I had an amazing time. And the Betamax Crinkle
Dash. The real
Dash,
merchandise profit is the fun we had along the way.
Exactly. The Betamax Crinkle Dash shirts are done like the Artifexian logo, so half of the word is like a solid color, and the other half of the word is stripy, just like the logo. I think it looks pretty cool, but you should go check it out and see what you got. So the last item, Bill.
And the last item is a flag. The podcast flag. So a field divided, the top half is black and the bottom half is white, and then a 12-pointed star in the middle in red.
Now, there had to have been changes for this. Like, Teespring don't offer legit flags. They only offer wall tapestries, which this is. So they didn't offer it in the correct aspect ratio. Which should be 16:9, but I can't remember what it is. So that is changed for this, obviously. And you can't see it in the preview there, but the background field has the curved white planet thing on it. It's just the way of the perspective works. It looks like it's just horizontally divided, but it's not. It's exactly like the podcast flag we talked about before, except the aspect ratio has changed.
Fantastic.
Now,
that was very cool.
Bill, if it's okay with you, what I would like to do, because I'm whenever I go shopping places or do anything, I always get like anxious when there's way too much choice. What's it called? It's something paralysis. Oh, like option paralysis.
Choice paralysis, I think.
Say again.
Choice paralysis.
Yeah, something
Or
like that. And
analysis paralysis is something as well.
something like that. And I always don't like that when I go places. And like, I'd like to try and curate this store based on like my likes and stuff. So we're not going to have a store that's going to be pages and pages long, full of loads of things to buy. What I would like to do is keep like a core line, which would be like the coat of arm t-shirts and the podcast logo t-shirts. And then every month or so, when a new podcast comes out and Bill has said another silly thing, we'll swap in newer
Excuse
merch.
me.
Well, excuse you.
I never said they were silly things. I said they were ridiculous things.
They're ridiculous even. But we'll swap in new stuff. So if it's okay with Bill, what I would like to do is the Betamax Crinkledash shirts, the cup and the flag, we're going to leave them up for this month. So from now to the airing of the next podcast episode, those are up and available if you want to grab them. After that, they're going to go away. If there's insane demand or stuff, we're able to bring them back. But ideally, we'd like to just refresh things. So that's, if Bill's okay with that, that's what we're going to do.
I mean, we can talk more about it off air, but that sounds fine by me, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And because having loads of stuff on a store is kind of just, I don't know, it feels like all you're doing is just trying to get as much money out of people as well. Like, here, I have everything. You will find something you like, give me all your money, like, so keeping it minimal is, I think, better. So yeah, go check it out. If you can afford it and if you can spare it, please consider buying merch. The best way of supporting internet creators is to do it directly through either like Patreon donations or through merch, because we get bigger cuts than things like ad revenue and sponsorships and things like that. So if you've been enjoying Artifexian and you like the ridiculous things Bill says, consider picking up the merch. Links in the show notes. What do we got, Bill? You got anything to follow up on?
A couple of fun things from Reddit this last month. We were talking in the last episode about South African currency. You had I can't remember, was it however many rands anyway.
Hold on, I'm getting it. Be prepared for noise. We got, hold on. So we got 10 South African rand, that's of the newer kind, and then of the old ones, featuring your man with the amazing name, we got 1 South African rand.
Okay. So, yes, featuring your man with the amazing name. That name, Colmer was telling us this, and he actually gave it in IPA in both Dutch and Afrikaans.
Cool.
I'm going to attempt the Dutch pronunciation. It seems slightly easier.
Bill, I think you should attempt it because there's a high probability it may be turned into merch.
I'm just going to move on. No. Jan Antonzon van Riebeck. Something like that.
Cool.
But turns out it's actually not a portrait of him.
Oh, the plot thickens.
Yeah. He actually had left the Cape in the 1660s to go do colonialism in Indonesia instead. And he had never had an official portrait done in Cape Town. This is what Colmer tells us. And later, when historians searched the archives of the estate, they found several portraits, 5 portraits, and they chose this one as the portrait of Van Riebeck. But it's actually not him. It was just some other guy, and they thought it was him, and they used that as the picture of him for 300 years. 350 years.
That's amazing. Like, if this portrait was included in the estate, was it someone close to Riebeck, like a brother or something, or was it just some randomer? Like, did he just pick up some art somewhere and was like, "Oh yeah,
let me check. Let me reread the article and see." I mean, it could be.
I hope it's just some random. I hope Jan just picked up a painting and was like, "Oh, I like the cut of that guy's jib," and then it becomes him for hundreds of years.
it was probably of another Dutchman named Bartholomeus Vermeulen.
So then not a brother.
Probably.
That's class. I enjoy that.
I mean, like, it might have just been a painting he owned, you know?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, he just your man Jan just picked up something in a market somewhere, and then people were
Yeah.
like, "That's Jan right there. We found it in his estate. It must be Jan." That's hilarious. Do your
Exactly.
research, lads.
So I thought that was kind of fun. And you know, that's world building relevant. Things can be wrong in real life, so it's always adds a bit of realism for people to make mistakes like that in your fictional settings.
For sure, yeah. For sure.
And the other good comment we got, particularly good comment I want to bring up, was from Gugu0202.
Gugu0202 rolls right off the tongue.
And they were talking about what you brought up in the last episode about conlangs in China. Gugu is a Hong Konger, and they say high fantasy and sci-fi are genres that aren't really a thing in Chinese culture. Oh, sorry, high fantasy and sci-fi fantasy are genres that aren't really a thing in the Chinese culture. I know that science fiction is, because the three body problem was pretty big in the last few years. That's I'm pretty sure it's originally written in China. But anyway, there exist conlanging communities in mainland China which focuses on conlangs, but because of how different the language works and due to the traditional Chinese way of studying or researching the Chinese language, conlanging is very different than what we Anglophones have an impression of. Most of the conlangs I see from those communities are just word for word. So I asked a bit more about that, and it's not. They said it's not exactly a cipher, but it's just kind of fusing Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and sometimes European languages together, and adding Japanese particles or changing the verbs slightly. But they don't create new things whole cloth. They kind of mash other stuff up.
Well, that's interesting.
Seems to be what Gugu is saying. They know of two logographic conlangs. One is called Vekkian, and it also has a name in what looks like a mixture of Chinese characters and Japanese characters. I can never remember what the different Japanese scripts are. I can never remember their names. But anyway, this is there is a Sino character script, a romanization, a katakanaization, and of course a conscript for this language, they say. And there's another one here which is just given in, the name is just given in logographic characters, so I don't know how to say that, but I'm going to just put that name into Google and see, do we get any? No, we don't really get anything.
I can permalink to it in the show notes if anyone's interested.
Hold on, I'm going to put it into Google Translate and see if the robot will say it.
While you're doing that, we also got a couple of people, I think, said that David J. Peterson has a logographic writing system for one of his conlangs. Forgive me if I got that wrong. I'm just going on what I remember from the Reddit. And I think someone said that Mark Rosenfelder of Language Construction Kit and the Advanced Language Construction Kit fame also has logographic systems for Almea, I think is one of his conlangs. Again, forgive me if I'm wrong. You can go check out the Reddit for this show.
Yeah, so that was Son of What said that David J. Peterson made X, which is a logographic conlang without a spoken language.
Oh.
So it's a purely written language.
Oh, cool.
Which is interesting. And Rosenfelder made multiple logographies for Almea.
Cool. So I remember that correctly.
Okay, so the pinyin for this. Now, I don't know if this is meant to be pronounced in like as Mandarin or whatever, but the pinyin seems to say Sheng Zhu Yu. Let's see what the robot says. Oh, that wasn't too far off.
Yeah, you weren't too bad. I hope that makes sense to someone. In terms of like, I hope someone knows that conlang, and everyone's not just sitting at home being all like, I don't know what to talk about. Like,
Yeah, well, look, you can put the characters in the show notes or something. And apparently, if you translate it from Mandarin, it just means city proverb.
yeah, but isn't Google Translate like hilariously bad at non-Indo-European languages?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, yeah. From my experience of Korean, it was kind of like again. I'm not in any way fluent or adept at Korean, but it was immediately obvious that Google Translate was like utterly useless for being in Korea, and not to the same extent where like if you use Google Translate when you're traveling in like Poland or whatever, it kind of all just works fairly well. But yeah, disaster in the East.
Well,
Podcast title "Disaster in the East." Or maybe that might be a bit loaded given the history of what's happened with disastrous events in the East, so maybe not. I'll walk that one back.
do you want to hear something that I'm confident must be Google Translate related, but is very slightly rude?
No.
Okay.
I love doing that with you because
No, it's fine. You don't have to like it.
Because you're always going all right, and then you're willing to sit through silence to make the other person suffer in a way that other people
we
aren't.
just
Like
move on. Like what's next on the show notes?
He's already moving on. I don't want to hear, but I'm sure the listeners will. Bill, do you want to proceed?
So I don't think I told you this, but this element of my South American trip. But as you know, I was in South America, and I think I told you that we went to see Christ the Redeemer.
Yeah.
And there's like a couple of shops and stuff around, like near the base of like where you disembark from the bus, before you actually go up to see the statue. And we had come back down and we'd gone into the cafe there, and I had gone to use the bathroom. And in the bathroom, there was a sign of, like, don't throw the hand towels down the toilet, that kind of thing. That sort of thing they always have in public spaces.
Yeah.
But it also said, and bear in mind that this was like a few dozen yards away from Jesus. It said on the sign, "Don't piss on the floor."
But wait, hang on. But that's valid. Like, what's the relevance about Jesus being nearby or not?
Like, it's a very crude way to put that on a sign. And I assumed it would have just been like Google translated, and the connotation hadn't been the same or whatever, and that's like how it came out. Because the way Google Translate works, it's very easy for that kind of thing to happen.
Okay, so if it said don't urinate on the floor, you'd be okay with it. Like, that's proper given the company of Jesus.
Well, I mean, I'm not bothered either way. It just seemed incongruous.
It does a bit, to be fair. Yeah, Google Translate could be a disaster, to be fair. But yeah, so anything else on the Sino-Conlang thing?
No. I think that's that.
If I may, we got a piece of physical mail.
Oh yeah.
That's not Bank of Artifexian related, so I'm going to put it here. It comes from a chap called Gabriel. And he opens with, "Dear Mr. Edward Grunewald." I'll let that slip. He says, "Happy 100,000 subscribers. My name is Gabriel." Then he tells us a little bit about where he's from. Not going to mention that because I don't want to dox the poor guy, because he's only 12-ish, because he's in 6th grade. He said he started watching the videos with the flag video. His school's flag has Comic Sans, which is terrible, and it should be changed. You should campaign, Gabriel. But from there went on to linguistics videos, and then started watching the Whirlwind videos. He subscribed on two counts, and he sent in this letter 2 cardboard flags, like Artifexian podcast flags, and said, "Would you mind signing them and sending them back so he could raise money for his school?" And I was like, "Yeah, totally." And I was I signed them and was all ready to post them. And then I realized that this letter is dated September 4th, 2018. Now, I don't know what's wrong with the postage system in, Britain and US, or the connections between those countries, because I get my mail delivered to Britain before here.
Oh yeah.
because of the like the PO box type thing. But it took like 6 months, which is a long time. So I feel like the reason why I'm bringing this up is I feel like we may have missed the window to contribute to the funding of Gabriel's school here. So I thought the least I could do was read out the letter and say, Gabriel, we did get it. It didn't get lost in the mail. It just took a horrifically long time. If you're still doing fundraising for the school, send us an email and we'd be more than happy to sign it. Just be aware that it may take another 6 months to get these flags to you. So just heads up. And yeah, and he says, oh yeah, the reason why he wrote as well is that the teacher was like, you should try and write to a famous person or a person who's your hero. And he says that I am both, which is really cute. And he said, you opened up a new window in my life, so it's the least I could do. Thank you for reading Gabriel out. So again, Gabriel, I'm really sorry that the post has just completely messed things up. If we can make something happen, we will. Leave us an email. Yeah?
For sure. Great to hear from you, Gabriel.
And while I'm at it, I might as well do my plug. If anyone wants to contribute to the Bank of Artifexian, there was no contribution this month, which again was just totally fine. But if anyone wants to, I'll leave my PO box in the show notes, and I'll also leave the map of all the countries that I have received money from. So if you're like, oh my god, I have North Korean currency or something, and he doesn't have North Korean currency, I might write him in. Write us a letter, we'll read it out on air, and my little collection will thank you for it. Mm-hmm.
Class, yeah.
Cool. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is that in the last show, you mentioned that we were talking about reboots. I was giving out about reboots, and you said you had thoughts on reboots, and we said we'd save it for this episode. So, do you still have those thoughts, and do you want to share them?
Yes. Okay. You were very anti-reboot from what you said the last day.
I think that's safe to say, yes.
Yeah. I would have a more moderate feeling towards them.
Can I perhaps caveat my statement from the last show?
It's too late.
I'm going to do it anyways.
Okay, go on.
If someone were to reboot something and it was truly brilliant, then like I have room in my worldview to allow for something brilliant to come through. Like, I'm not saying that all reboots are automatically crap. I just dislike the practice of it. Do you know what I mean? But every so often, a great reboot will pop through, and I'm more than happy to concede and be like, that is a great reboot. Totally happy with that. So I'm not kind of like zealous in my stance here. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. This touches a bit on stuff I said before regarding the role of stories, like modern stories, superheroes and things, as being sort of like mythology, modern mythologies. And having reboots allows you to tell new stories about a character. And we know who that character is, and the concept of that character doesn't need to be established. But we can tell a new story about that character without being weighed down by a previous movie or stuff that happened in other stories. So, like, let's take Spider-Man, right? And there was way too many Spider-Man films, absolutely. And they've had 3 reboots, or they've had 3 versions of it in 15 years or something, which is far too many. Well, there was Tobey Maguire, there was Andrew Garfield, and there's Tom Hollander not Tom Holland, sorry. Tom Hollander's an entirely different actor. There's Tom Holland in the MCU. But you couldn't have told the stories that Tom Holland is in. You couldn't have told the MCU stories with the Tobey Maguire or the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Because they had made choices with the character and they had gone directions that weren't compatible with what the MCU was doing. So,
sure.
From that point of view, it makes sense. And if you want to do something with Superman, then you don't want to be held back by all of the old Superman films. So yeah, no, I think that they serve a role there. They definitely can be overdone. You can have too many of them, and you can be too zealous about them, or they can happen too quickly. But I wouldn't say that they're in and of themselves a bad thing at all.
Yeah, okay, I'd agree with that. I just think that sometimes they can be used for. I think your argument is quite a creative and artistic argument, but I think sometimes studio heads um, see them as a great way to just make more money with existing uh, intellectual property. You know.
Yeah,
And I think when it's done like that, and when it's obviously done like that, where they're just milking the cash cow, then it's terrible. But like I said,
yeah, that's fair.
if someone makes a great reboot, I'm more than happy to have that reboot slip through my net of like I dislike these reboots. Um, and I think again I've said it before. I think I always err on the side of just newness in general, though. Like if I like why tell another story through Spider-Man? Why not make up a new superhero? Do you know? Um, and I kind of my brain naturally defaults to like I want to hear about something. I want to learn about something
Yeah.
completely new. But that's just me. Obviously, the opinions differ. Something serious. Yeah, on the subject of MCU, have you watched all of the MCU? Have you finished the thing?
I've
Because
never seen Hulk actually, which is
Edward
the
Norton,
very first one, I think, technically.
the
Um,
wait, no, hang on, no, wait, hang on, with the one with Edward Norton.
yes.
So I know this because I tried watching the MCU. It is not the very first MCU one. That would be Iron Man.
Did that come up after Iron Man?
Yeah, because in at the end of
Oh,
Hulk,
okay, fair enough.
your man Stark comes in. You know the thing that happens at the end of every movie where someone from another movie comes in. That occurs
Yeah.
in the Hulk. So Iron Man has already been established, and I think he's had two movies before the Hulk, but I could be wrong about that. I can't remember.
Hold on.
But it's definitely not the first. 100%. I'm willing to bet everything I own on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Boom! He keeps all his possessions. Yes.
So yeah, so that's the only one I haven't seen. Yeah, I've heard it's not great. The one before it with who's that Australian actor that came out around like 2004 was really bad.
But that's not part of this whatever cycle in the MCU.
It's not part of the MCU. No.
Yeah,
That's not part of the MCU.
Yeah. So
but yeah, I'm up to date on the MCU.
Okay.
Other than that.
So what are your thoughts overall? Because I tried to get into it because loads of people have been saying like, "Oh, get into MCU," and I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to just start at the start and watch all the movies." And I got to what's the last thing we watched? Thor was the last thing we watched. So we watched everything in chronological order up to Thor, and it's man, I still don't get it. It was I don't get the appeal. Like everyone's crazy about it, and I'm watching it. I'm coming at it really kind of like in good faith and being all like I want to like this. I'm going to give this his best shot, and I foresaw myself really liking the whole like large scale continuity and things like that. But it's just I don't know, man. It just does nothing for me, and I'm baffled as to what it does for others. So what's it do? What's it do for you?
You saw 4 of the films then?
No, surely more because there's 3 Iron Men. There's the
Yeah,
Hulk.
but Thor is the 4th one, I think.
And that would make it the 5th man. There's 3 Iron Men. There's definitely 3 Iron Men before that.
But the 3 Iron Men didn't come out in a row.
No, but it wasn't. It's something like again. I'm just going off the top of my head. It wasn't something like Iron Man, Hulk, Iron Man. Some crack like that.
No.
Oh right.
Iron Man, Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor.
Where's Captain America? We watched Captain America as well.
Captain America is after Thor, and it is garbage.
What is after Captain America?
The Avengers.
Oh no, I watched the Avengers a long time ago, not part of this attempt. So technically,
Okay.
I've gone up until the Avengers. That's the one where in that big ass ship. They all just to get around. There's a big ship, and it's very long. That movie, I seem to remember.
Yeah, the helicarrier. Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched that, but I don't really recall it. The Captain America thing that was terrible. That was awful.
It's like it had a really strong concept about the character. Like they made him, but then they didn't want to use him fighting. They used him as propaganda. And I was like, that was brilliant. That was really good. And then it just turned into garbage from that point.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Like I supported the going off and actually being a superhero. That was cool. But like, Hydra was such awful villains in it, and you don't need to make worse Nazis. Nazis are sufficiently evil for any purpose, and I find it kind of gross that they have like the film kind of made them like the Nazis but worse. And it's like, you don't need to do that.
Well, I mean, I realize Nazis are very bad, but we're in superhero land here where everything is just more, and like making the guy like be didn't he like he turned into some sort of like literal monster with his big red face and all that sort of jazz. Like,
yeah, Red Skull, yeah.
Is that not just kind of fitting with the superhero thing of just like everything's just extra?
Yeah, but I mean, and I know Hydra already exists in the comics, but there's something about the way they were framed in that film just really put me off.
Do you know what put me off? The poor CGI on your man, Captain America, when he's meant to be all thin and stuff. Like his head looks like it doesn't fit on his body. I kept expecting it to just fall over. You know the way like if you know the way you're meant to hold a baby's head, otherwise it'll just like flap. I kept thinking about that when and I couldn't get into like his character and story because I kept being distracted by these visuals. Like he just, and also a thing I really hated about it, and this isn't really a criticism. This is just kind of a very Edgar thing. I'm a very very skinny guy, right? Like currently, if anyone's interested, I weigh 57 kilos, which is like that's 104-ish pounds. And I have no idea what that is in stone. I can't do that conversion in my head. Which is light. It's very light. And that's fine. I'm a runner and that's class. But
pretty much bang on 9 stone.
Bang on 9 stone. So I'm 9 stone. 104-ish pounds, 57 kilos. Anyhow, in Captain America, he's obviously very skinny. And I would say that the body he has before he gets all ripped is very akin to my body. And the entire way through, they were just like, you're not strong enough. You're not a real man. Like they kept referring to him as being like frail and weak, and I'm like, pal, like there are those of us that have slender frames, right, that like do amazing physical things. Like I would argue running a marathon is an amazing physical endurance thing, and most people who do that are like don't have the build of Captain America when he's buff. And it really irked me, this sort of like weakness sort of thing, as if like strength is tied to body mass, and it is a bit, but strength is also like willpower and a mental thing. It just that annoys me.
Yeah, and he does have that though. I mean, he very explicitly does have that.
Oh no, he does. No, sorry, my grievance is with every other character around him who just continuously hammers home that he is weak, and I'm like, all these characters need to shut up, just stop, like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's part of the point, but yeah, that is absolutely fair.
But anyhow, so back to the question at hand, because we got derailed there. What is it about the MCU? Is it that made you watch all the films? And I'm assuming you enjoyed most of the films. So what's the drawing point? What am I missing here?
I don't know. I mean, I really like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I think he's a very fun character. No, Iron Man 2 is a pretty bad film. I will grant.
Okay.
But I like that character. And I don't know. It's the first time it's been done on that kind of scale that the stories would interact on to that extent. And I've wanted that for a long time out of superhero media. And it deals a lot with what I find difficult in superhero comics, in that the stories. I can't take a story where Magneto is going to blow up America or whatever, and the X-Men are the only people that can stop him, because that world also contains Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and I find that not addressed so often, that it kind of puts me off. And I know that's not the spirit of things, but the medium doesn't really work for me sometimes because of that. And the MCU addresses that.
How?
Because they are all interacting. They do interact with each other.
Okay. But I mean, it's still... No, that's fair. I was about to say, it still leaves the problem that if all of these superheroes are interacting with one another, their combined strength makes for a very formidable defense. And I was like, you'd want to build up a pretty substantial enemy, but I believe your man, the purple dude, is very substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose that's okay then. If they're all interacting, their combined strength is there. You need to just create a suitable villain, and if that is done, that's
Yeah.
okay.
And I think because it's it's 10 years old or whatever, and it's happened reasonably close to real time, which is another gripe that I have with comics, that it has this sort of like sliding comics time thing that again isn't really that big a deal, but it's a personal thing that I find hard to engage with.
Wait.
Um,
Sorry. Can you define sliding comic time? I don't know what you're talking about.
like Spider-Man meets Wolverine, right, in a comic.
Right.
And they, that maybe it crosses over in both their individual titles, and then they go off and they have their individual things, and they don't interact, and they interact again in 3 years of like real time later, like 36 issues later. And in that time, Spider-Man has had a really like two really personal introspective stories that where the events of a few days are spread out over a long arc of maybe 10 episodes. And Wolverine has had all these like long shots where he like does loads of traveling, and maybe he's like in a coma for a while. So entirely different amounts of time have passed for each character, but then they interact again. And that happening on the whole scale. And the fact that comics have to be slower than real life anyway, because of how they're produced and the kind of stories that they tell. My mind wants to like make that match up in a plausible way, and it can't.
Okay, so the TLDR on your viewpoint so far is it's the framework of this story appeals to you in terms of like the continuity, the long scale storytelling, and yeah.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah, that's part of why I enjoy them. But also, I enjoy a lot of the individual films in it as well. I mean, the Guardians of the Galaxy are just loads of fun.
Oh no, I have seen Guardians of the Galaxy as well. Sorry, I've also seen
Yeah.
Black Panther, but I was when I was kind of like I've only watched whatever 4 or 5 of them. That was specifically in reference to this concerted effort to just watch them through.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I've seen one movie with the purple dude on a plane. Lots and lots of people died in that film. If that means anything, I don't know. Whatever film that was, I only watched part of it though because I fell asleep.
When was this? Was it in the last year?
Maybe. I think I might have watched it on the way out to LA. So then, yes, within the past like 6 months
That was probably Infinity War.
Okay, there. Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Yeah. See, what's mad is I don't want to. We've already been going for 40 minutes, so I need to wrap this up fairly quickly. But what you were saying, like those are things that also should appeal to me, but there's something about the films that just makes me not fall in love with them. So it must be. I'm imagining what it must be is just the individual films for me just aren't gripping enough. Aren't gripping to the extent where I care about them and can feed into the long arc and things like that. So I don't know. I might give it another pop because it's a big cultural thing, and I feel like I should be partaking in the cultural thing. But sure, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. Spider-Man is a good one.
Which Spider-Man?
Spider-Man Homecoming. So that's the...
Okay, no.
I liked what they did with him when we're talking about the reboots here, because they didn't bother giving him an origin story or like an establishment film, because everyone knows Spider-Man. I mean, come on, we all know, like, for fuck's sake, like, we all know what Spider-Man is. We don't need to... I'll take that again. For God's sake, we all know Spider-Man. Like, we don't
I'll just
need to...
beep you, man. I'll just beep you. It's fine.
We all know Spider-Man. We don't need another story establishing Spider-Man. So he just turns up in Civil War, and is a character in Civil War, and then he gets his own film a few films later, and it's a high school film where the main character is Spider-Man, and that's all it is, and it's great.
Yeah, that sounds like something that it could actually be fun. That sounds like kind of fun.
Especially if you like high school films.
Yeah, for sure, and superhero films. Like, it's a match made in heaven. I really dug that other Spider-Man. It came out relatively recently. It had all the extra Spider-Man. It was an animated thing.
Oh,
Into the Spider-Verse.
I
That,
haven't seen that.
man, that was great. That was so good. It had everything I really liked. It had like an innovative art style. Like, I love my aesthetics. I love just like pictures on screen, and it was really pretty. Um, and
Colors, shapes,
I'm a simple
all
man.
that stuff.
I just want to watch my pretty pictures, but it was really great. And I really like the way they drew on how comic books were made, and that fed into how the artwork was created, which was amazing. I thought the story was cool and fun. And really riveting, and as well, really like the soundtrack, because one of my favorite artists at the moment is Post Malone, and he is on the soundtrack. It's got a song called "Sunflower" with
Post
Sway
Malone is
Lee.
one of your favorite artists.
I have come to just adore Post Malone. I think what's happened was that I kind of was intrigued by him as a character, because he's this weird mishmash of contradictions. And then kind of learned about him through his character, and then was like, oh, I must check out his music. And I began to listen to it, and I was like, I really dig it. I really like his music. Which is semi-controversial, because I think a lot of people are just kind of like, oh, it's mumble rap crap. But I don't know, it makes nice ear sounding for me. It's all good. But yeah, it's a great film. I really enjoy that. But that's not part of the MCU thing. It's a whole different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. It is.
I really enjoyed it. But anyway, we must move on.
Let's move on. That was follow up.
So we usually start with some world building in the writer's room. But this month I want to start with my video, the last video I released, called How to Design Realistic Climates Part 1. The reason why I'm putting myself first here is that, shock horror, I don't really have anything to talk about. I went through the comments on Reddit, like on my subreddit, the world building subreddit, the map making subreddit. Links to all of these are in the show notes, by the way. On Twitter, under the YouTube video, and there isn't really anything for me to talk about, which is kind of like, it's a bit stunning, and I'm kind of like, holy god, did I do a good job here? This is brilliant. And most of the comments that came up, they can be answered had the commenters watched the previous videos or something. So it's like, you never explained X, and it was covered in like the oceans video or the winds video or something like that. So for the first time ever, I feel like this is like, I feel like it's a success. Like, most of the time when I make something, I'm always like, I see all the failures in it, and I'm like, oh, I could have done this better. But this feels like it's genuinely like it worked, which is pretty cool. So unless you have something to tear apart, Bill, we should probably head into world building.
I don't have anything to tear apart at all. I have one comment and one question.
Go for it.
So my comment is, I had figured out a lot of where to put these Köppen climate classification groups, just kind of by inspection. Like, I'd planned out the wind and ocean currents and like the latitudes and stuff, and looked at similar things on Earth, and just said, oh well, that's what the situation is there, so I'll just carry it across. But I didn't understand stuff like why you could have coastal deserts like the Atacama, or why the Sahara went right to the west coast, and you explained that.
Yes, Edgar
So
win.
thank you. Yeah, so
No
like,
problem.
I had been kind of puzzled by that, so that makes absolutely perfect sense to me now.
Oh, that's awesome. That genuinely fills me with great joy. That's class.
I'm glad.
What's the question?
So the degrees you use, like, degrees north or south, those figures are based on an axial tilt the same as Earth's, right?
Yeah, I say roughly the same. Like, think of
Sure.
it like Earth's axial tilt with like error bars, a couple of degrees either side. You can fudge it a little bit, but yes, like Earth.
Yeah. But if it was to say like be 40 degrees of tilt instead of 30 degrees or whatever, would you just be able to increase everything by a third, roughly, and it would still be okay?
Okay, so I can't fully answer this because I need to do the research for part 3, because this is the topic of part 3 in this
Okay.
in this series. But from the things I kind of instinctively know from like reading the world building subreddit for like years and things, is that you can, to a point, increase things, and just kind of hand wave it, like increase it by X amount, and just just be all like, it's like that because the planet is tilted more, or it's hotter, or something like that. But there comes a point where you can't do that. So I think at about 40 degrees of axial tilt, you begin to have real like different consequences for biomes, because there's so much seasonality on your world.
Right.
Because remember, the greater the tilt, the more kind of seasonal variation there is. Conversely, the lower the tilt, the more everything just is kind of very samey throughout the year. So at about 40, what people say happens is that your planet is too seasonal to have biomes like rainforests that require conditions to be hot and wet year round. There's too much seasonality. So you will get effects like that. And I'm inferring here, because again, I've yet to fully do research on this, I'm inferring that if there's too much seasonality for a rainforest, there may likely also be too much seasonality for deserts as well. They won't be dry enough year round. Now I'm inferring that, and I don't know that for a fact. So this is why
maybe like very far in the interior of a continent would still be dry, right?
Sure, yeah, but you wouldn't get like I'm speculating that if we had 40 degrees of axial tilt, the Sahara Desert may not span the entirety of North Africa. But I don't. I need to stress, I do not know that for sure. I need to do a bit of research on that. So yeah, to answer your question, you can, to a point, but up to at a certain point, it just becomes too varied to keep things Earth-like. But this would be the topic of video number 3.
So the next stage is finding out what that point is.
Yeah, and I can say this in advance. We don't know, because again, like, scientists are not busy spending their time answering these questions. They're answering real world questions. So part 3 is going to be a whole lot of fudging. Like there does come a point where it's just like you need to be all like, okay, if I have a setup like say 40 degrees of axial tilt, what does that mean? Well, increased seasonality. Therefore, we could reasonably extrapolate these characteristics, which may or may not be true. We don't know, because there's not a whole lot written. So it's, there's I'm never going to be able to say at X point, with regards to temperature or tilt or rotation rate or whatever, you can expect this exact thing. That's just not a thing I'm able to do with biomes. And if someone has that, send me documents, please. But I've never been able to find anything super precise.
Cool.
Which makes sense, because we're out of the realm of just like neat mathematical equations. And we're into the realms of kind of like artistic license takes over at this point.
Absolute speculation.
Absolute and utter speculation. But also, like I said, artistic license. There comes a point where you need to put away a little bit of the science and be all like, I want my deserts to be this sort of shape, or my planet's going to have this tilt and I want it to have this thing here. I can reasonably say that, and ergo it's fine. But yeah, so does that answer the question?
It does.
Excellent, cool. So without further ado, let's crack into a bit of world building. That is the shortest segment we've ever done on Artifexian. Let it be known, I plowed
of any topic.
How long have we been doing this? Like 4 years? 5 years? How many years? Many
4 years.
Oh, it's been so long. It's been crazy. Can you imagine? I was. How old was I? I was 25, I think, when we started this. 25, Bill.
So you were 24 when you started the channel?
Yeah, because it was in 2014, which means I just turned 24. Yeah, and it was like a year later we did this, roughly, so I was 25. It's crazy.
She didn't even know you were born.
I know. Exactly. Anyhow, world building.
Okay, so this is something a little bit different this week. Every damn episode. God damn it.
Okay, alright, that's possible fodder for a t-shirt there, Bill. I'm making a note. This week. Okay, this month.
For episode 41, I have done something a little bit different. I'm just going to crack into it, and then we can talk about it afterwards.
I suppose it's worth noting, or is it worth noting that this is not in Handwavia?
This is not necessarily in Handwavia.
Oh wait, no, sorry, I said that wrong. It's not in Janspar. It's not in your one where you need to be all tight-lipped about stuff. This is in the other setting.
Oh, it's very much not in Janspar. Yes.
So we're outside of that realm, but something totally different this month. So do you want to crack into it now?
Yeah.
Cool.
Extract from Fertas's Travels on the Narsine Sea. Lying in a sheltered harbour on the southern shores of the Narcinia is Naabeth, a city of some 200,000 souls. This city is a major centre of trade and travel, but it is known primarily not for its produce, nor its piety, nor its palaces, but for yet another reason. Naabeth has elevated the art of combat to its highest form. Where other cities have fighting pits, theatres dedicated to mutilation and bloodletting, Naabeth's sacred sands ensure death is rare for gladiators and allow fighters to accumulate wisdom and experience over many years in the arena. Unlike most other lands, the gladiators of Naabeth are not enslaved. It is legally required that any who fight in Naabeth's arenas must be free, and graduation from one of the city's gladiatorial academies grants citizenship of the city to the student. It is not uncommon for enslaved fighters, victorious in other cities, to escape to Naabeth, seek a sponsor for their manumission, and fight to a life as a free citizen. Naabeth is ruled by an assembly of diverse voices, holders of traditional offices both ceremonial and practical, the heads of aristocratic families, and elected representatives of the free people of the various districts. The city holds dominion over a large area of lesser cities, villages, and several nomadic bands, none of whom have direct voices on the assembly, but are nonetheless considered to have some influence through those of their kin resident in the city's districts. Unique to Naabethi gladiatorial culture are the sacred sands, blessed earth scattered upon the field of combat and imbued with life-preserving magic. Only the most grievous of blows will truly fell a combatant in a Naabethi bout, though particularly bitter opponents may agree to fight without this facility and chance the death of their rival, or themselves. The most famed gladiators fight in great arenas, of which there are 3 in Naabeth. The premier of these is on the grounds of an ancient temple, the cult of which is long forgotten. But it is here that the earth for the sacred sands must be gathered, and from here that they draw their power. This arena, known to Naabethi as the Temple of the Sands, is where the final combat in the annual games takes place. While in other cities, a single style of combat may be favoured, wrestling or spear fighting, or duelling with daggers and whips. In Naabeth, combatants of all disciplines can be found in the ring. The gladiators are figures of public fame and renown among the Naabethi, often far more than their own politicians and elders. Indeed, the politicians and the gladiators may often form alliances. Political factions seek the support of popular athletes and stables of successful gladiators in exchange for sponsorship. The current Grand Champion, however, Kasuta, is known for her relative indifference to politics. Visitors to Naabeth are advised to attend a gladiatorial bout, if not at the Temple of the Sands or the other 2 great theatres, then the lesser combats that may take place in marketplaces, temple yards, or other diverse locations. Some fans of blood sports in other cities are known to express that the reduced chance of death in Naabeth's arenas makes for a less skillful bout or a less exciting spectacle. It is wise to keep such opinions unexpressed among the Naabethi.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Very cool. Now, there's some extra documents here, which we're going to get into a second, but if it's okay with you, Bill, I shall start my interrogation.
Go for it.
Has there been any MMA events going on of late that have made you want to write about fighting? Because I know you're an MMA fan.
No.
No, it's just a thing. You just were like, I'm going to write about this.
Yeah, I've had this idea for a while. We'll get into that as we go.
Okay, all right. My main thing is, I suppose. Okay, here's one thing I need clearing up. I don't know what a manumission is. You say it here. It is not uncommon for enslaved fighters victorious in other cities to escape to Nabeth, seek a sponsor for their manumission, and fight to a life as a free citizen.
Manumission is to be freed from slavery.
Oh, so like emancipation, like similar route or whatever.
Uh, probably actually, yeah.
Interesting. I just never came across that word before.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only other thing really is that one, I think the world building here is class
Thank you.
because I love the way it turns the idea of the fighters being slaves on its head, and then
Hmm.
like not only does that, but also like gives complexity to the fighters. Like you say that the current champion, like the fighters are like they are characters that have political influence in the world, but the current champion isn't really bothered about that. So it's like it's kind of very complex, which is really cool, and it's a really nice move away from kind of like gladiator style things where it's like rich people dominate the poor people who fight to the death. So I think that's really nuanced and really cool.
Thank you.
Um, the sacred sands idea again, I think it's a wonderful bit of world building. The whole idea that like fighters can't die, so it becomes more about skill. But then people also say that it's not that skillful because you can't die. So it's like it's very complex. Really enjoy that, and that's kind of my responses to it. It's just I love the idea of the fighting bits, love the idea of the sacred sands, and love the complexity of the character you put forward.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I don't have more to say about it.
No, that's all great to hear. What was I going to say? Yeah, the thing about the politics, that's inspired in part by more sort of Byzantine than Roman history. There were originally four, and later became kind of only two main factions in Byzantium, which had an influence on politics. They function a little bit like kind of political parties, and they were based around chariot racing. They were based around chariot racing teams, yeah. And there was an event. I think an emperor nearly got deposed over. I can't remember. The conflict wasn't about the sport, but it was sparked by a disagreement between supporters of the blue faction and the green faction, and has led to like a sort of brief civil war and all these riots in Byzantium. And I think it was Justinian briefly lost the throne, or came very close to losing the throne or something.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't realize there were any real world precedent for what you wrote. That's cool.
Yeah, and the thing, I mean, like in Rome, gladiators were slaves, as far as I know, but they were to a degree kind of like professional athletes, and they were celebrities. So while they weren't free for the most part, as far as I understand, they did have a huge status, and they were. I actually read this the other day. They would be asked to give endorsements to products, and this was meant to be in the Ridley Scott film, Gladiator, the Russell Crowe film. Mm-hmm. They had originally written a thing that like a gladiator would come out and say, buy this guy's flower or whatever, but it was removed because it would have been seen as unrealistic, even though it was real and historically accurate. They figured audiences wouldn't buy it, so they took it out.
Oh, I had no idea. That seems so against everything we think ancient Rome is. That's crazy. Rampant capitalism in the ancient world. Holy God.
Yes, apparently so. They had quite a high status at times in certain contexts, but they were famous and they were celebrated, despite not actually being free, as far as I understand. And there was I think it was the emperor that's in Gladiator.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix
is his name.
Gladiator character. It's not Coriolanus. That was a totally different guy.
No, that's your man Finds Voldemort.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, Commodus, that was it. Who was a historical character who did fight as a gladiator. He was obsessed with the Colosseum,
Wait,
and
so hang on. So the Emperor in Gladiator fought as a gladiator.
yeah, like he does that in the film.
Oh god, it's been
Um,
years. I
he
can't remember.
he fights Maximus. But he did that in real life as well. He was obsessed with the games, and he would fight in the ring. And he was murdered in real life. He was murdered by his trainer, who was a professional gladiator. He was like a famous wrestler, and conspirators like bribed him to murder the emperor. So the emperor was like taking a bath or something, and the the assassin, whose name I can't remember. I was reading about this the other day. Narcissus, that was it.
Arya
Narcissus,
Stark.
who was a famous gladiator, like just went in and like strangled him in the bath.
Huh, what a terrible way to go. Man, I'm so
At least
glad
you're
we
having a
don't.
bath.
What?
At least you're in the bath. Like the baths are nice.
Yeah, but like I'm assuming he thought himself as a man of high stature, and to die in the bath is a bit kind of like of all the ways to go. I'm really glad we don't live in the ancient world. You know, people. This is not a new take or anything, but loads of people are like they romanticize the past and like, oh, wouldn't it be
Yeah.
great to be alive then? And the answer is a resounding no. Like at no point in my life, like let's say I become like really internet famous, right? At no point do I need to worry that that fame might get me assassinated, right? Like, because we live in a
What do
modern
you
society,
think?
and it's like I don't even know I can't even comprehend how terrible life must have been back then. It's
They
awful.
didn't have dentists.
Dentists.
Yeah, I mean, like I think we underappreciate like how good actually having like people to take care of your teeth is.
Begrudgingly. I mean,
Yeah, oh yeah, like it's not like going to the dentist is a pleasant experience, but the fact of dentistry is very positive.
that's fair. You know, fun anecdote. I really enjoy going to the dentist. The thing I don't like about going to the dentist is the fact that they make you hand over horrific amounts of money. Like that's the bit I don't want. But like the actual like you're in the chair now and we're going to start grinding your teeth away. Genuinely, man, I find it very therapeutic because they numb you. Like there's the pain of the initial numbing injection and that's not comfortable. But once you're
Yeah,
numb and they're busy drilling away, if you can block out of your head what's going on and kind of like almost like do a little bit of mindfulness while you're there, it's almost like getting an internal massage. Like your skull is slowly vibrating very gently back and forth. And like I've been known to literally just fall
Jesus,
asleep in the dentist just because it's so relaxing to me. Which is the thing is every time I tell that to someone, they're like, "You're mental. Stop."
hard agree.
Hard agree. um what was it? I was listening to an episode of the Irish History podcast, which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know or who is interested in Irish history, you should check out this podcast. It's made by this Irish chap who does tours around Dublin. It's a really great podcast, and I thoroughly suggest that you go check it out. I was listening to it the last day, anyways, and he talked a bit about what life in the early Middle Ages was like in Ireland, and he brought
Hmm.
up this point that the way flour or something was made here, or maybe everywhere in the Middle Ages, but specifically in Ireland, the process of making it left behind grit in the flour. So when they went to
Hmm.
eat the bread or whatever, it was like you were eating bits of ground up stone. And apparently, tooth health in ancient in medieval Ireland was like horrific. As in, like people had like it was not uncommon to have like just massive abscesses, just things growing on your teeth falling out, like, and it just the way he paints the picture, I'm kind of like, oh god, oh it sounds so bad, it sounds terrible. And I had never even considered like I always thought that like without toothpaste and toothbrushes, obviously dental health would be worse, but I never thought that like they'd be eating bits of stone and things,
Hmm.
and it just completely wrecked their health, which is just horrific. The ancient world is horrific. TLDR.
Yep.
Um,
No disagreement
to,
here.
to go back to this for a second, because I just spotted one of my underlying thing. Another bit of world building I really enjoy, and it's only a little throwaway line, but I really like it. I think people should try and do this more in their writings. Is you mentioned that there's the temple
Mm.
from which the sacred sands come from. But I really like the idea that you wrote the cult of which, i.e., the temple, has long been forgotten. Like it's a really good bit of world building. It's like there was something there before. this world has grown and evolved and moved past it, and people just use this facility without knowledge of what came before. I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Really good.
Thank you.
And not explained. You hid the world building there. Like, I don't know if you know what that cult is or whatever, but if you do, you hit it, and that's class.
There's a big influence on how I've thought about history and thought about world building. I don't know, I might have mentioned this before. You know the Total War games?
Oh, vaguely.
So they're like a kind of grand strategy. Or do they count as grand strategy? I don't know. They're games. They're across a couple of different historical eras. The very first one is feudal Japan, and then there's like a Rome Total War, medieval Total War, and so on. There's an expansion or a mod for one of the Rome Total Wars, the name of which has gone out of my head right now, but it was made by like real hardcore history geeks.
So it's like it's like ancient Rome sponsorship, ancient Rome branding pack.
The name's just gone out of my head. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Europa Barbarorum, I think it's called.
Ancient Rome shilling. Sorry.
Not at all. And the user license for installing this mod is, by installing the software, the user agrees to read more history.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all they ask for. But I remember playing that years ago, and on pretty much every island, or pretty much every province that you look at in the game has a historical note. So if you're in say Spain, like one of the provinces of Spain, they'll have a bit about who was there before the Romans. They'll have a bit about like the Celtiberians, or they'll have a bit about the Carthaginian colonization of the peninsula, that kind of thing. And on every island, or every like group of islands in the Mediterranean, there is something different from like the Stone Age or from the like Bronze Age that we don't really know that much about. They have them on Sicily, they have them on Corsica, and they have them in the Balearics. There are Stone Age or like late Bronze Age or something structures that we don't really know that much about the history of.
Aliens.
And I just think that's really interesting, and that like really made me think like how deep history is and how complex it is, that in Roman times they had this old stuff. Even in Roman times there was this old stuff there. And that's been a big influence in how I think about how I build worlds. There's always another bit behind, and people are always people, and there's something there.
Yeah, and that old stuff like should not be explained. It should just be like we've lost it. We don't know what this is anymore.
Yeah, it can be, but it doesn't have to be, and it's not any worse for not explaining it, because
it's better for not explaining it.
Very often, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I thoroughly agree with that. Thoroughly agree. And people on the subject of that, the disclaimer or the agreement form on that game, people I think genuinely should read more history, myself included. I've started like I said, that Irish history podcast, I've started to like get very interested in Irish history and Irish mythology and things like that. And I think it's really important that people read history to understand where you come from and what the world was like before, and to be a better rounded sort of person. I'm not saying that to be judgmental, because I don't do enough of it myself. I'm saying this more for myself than anyone else. But I think it's a fun endeavor as well. Like, it's just story time, except that it really happened, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, on your have you got anything else to say about the actual prose? And if not, can we move on to the other bits of text that the people the listeners might be reading right now, going, "What the hell is this?"
No, I think I've gotten most of what I want out of the actual recitation.
Recitation. So Bill, before we aired, Bill sent me on this document and was like, "I'm going to read page 1, but page 2 and 3 I'm just going to put up for people to be able to read." What's the context here, right? So we have this bit of prose, but there's all this additional stuff. What are you doing? What's going on?
So I've had an idea in my head for ages now, for years at this stage, that I want to run an RPG, run a campaign where the players play as gladiators, but like you were commenting there, turn it around so that they're not slaves and it's not going to end in like a Spartacus revolt, that they're just professional athletes. And the sport that they're in is gladiatorial combat. And I thought that could be a lot of fun, both for just like flipping that cliche, and because you can make it like a film about boxing or like a film about sports, and draw on those tropes instead. And I've had that in my head for a long time, and I decided that this week, or Jesus Christ, I decided that this month, that's what I'd right. I've been thinking a lot about gaming recently and about RPGs, and I wanted to get some of this out of my head and onto paper. So Nabeth is the city I've come up with if I ever do run this campaign.
I still think we should try and aim to do at least some campaign, at least some part of a campaign on the podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
To pull the veil back a little bit, we mentioned this before, like ages ago, that we were talking about doing it, and we tried to get it up and running.
We were going to do it last year, and it's my schedule didn't work for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and now that I've played D&D as a DM, I'm suddenly aware of how involved this is. So it just didn't work when we tried to make it happen. But at some stage, I think we'll try to make it happen. So you never know, listeners. Maybe there will be a Nabeth campaign with myself, Bill, and maybe some other internet friends. Who knows? But we have this idea of a on-air tabletop game still in the back of our heads. Now, the thing I want to talk about, or I want to just bring up and quiz you about, is you said off-air that you would show the second and third pages of this document to the players. Because for me, right, it read so obviously as page 1, the bit you've just heard, listeners, was like a bit of prose. And then page 2 and 3 is like a DM's document outlining the various factions, the various characters, the sort of storytelling mechanics in a way, like where the story could go. And it was just, you just offhandedly said, I'd give that to the players. And I was like, what? No, what are you talking about? Like, that must be the DM's material. Fill me in here.
I don't know. I think there's nothing there that is secret or that like wouldn't be known by people living in the city. It wouldn't, like, if you were what I have in the concept of the player characters being, if you were a gladiator in a stable in Nabeth, that's all information that you would have.
Okay, maybe, but if you were visiting Gladiator, possibly not. And you'd have to talk to the locals or talk to like some politician or whatever. In which case, that information, it shouldn't be readily available for the players. It should be for you to give to them if they quiz the NPCs in the correct way.
No, I think everything that's there is just very kind of like public information. It's like, it's just like you or me knowing who like the Taoiseach is, or knowing
that is the Irish Prime Minister, for anyone who wonders what those sounds were.
Yeah, the head of the Irish government. Yeah, no, I just think that's just kind of like normal everyday stuff. There's nothing there that I would feel would need to be kept back, and I think giving players that kind of information, it gives them a kind of a framework to think about the world, and it immerses them a bit. I mean, the prose does that as well, for sure, but it gives them a couple of more specifics to hang on to.
So I apologize to listeners here because we're getting very into the mechanics of how to run a D&D sort of thing here, but just bear with me because I'm running the second installment of the game, of the campaign, this Sunday. So this is intriguing because the characters are going into a town. Well, hopefully they'll go into town if they don't screw me over. And in the town, there's a whole bunch of places to visit and stuff, which, like you pointed out there, are kind of general knowledge. The person who's bringing them to town would know all of this. But at no point did the instructions, like the book or whatever, or myself, like kind of think that it's a good idea to just like give them a sheet of paper and be all like, here are the main buildings, or here are the main people in the town. That it's all kept behind the scenes, and it's up for them to to draw it out.
Yeah, but that's a different.
Even though it's common knowledge, do you know?
Okay, but we're framing things very different. My concept for the game is you are a stable of gladiators working in Nabeth.
Okay.
That is the core of the campaign. Is that that is what you are, and the purpose is to like become a more successful gladiator or whatever,
and then defeat the dragon.
Well, obviously,
that's
how all RPGs must end. Whereas what your thing is they are going to a town. Now, if I had them go on tour to another city, I would do it like the thing you're describing.
Right.
That they would have kind of bare bones information about the place, but they wouldn't know who all of the potentates are and what like all the different factions and stuff are necessarily.
So, and then how would you deliver this information to your players? Would you literally hand them documents, or would you just sit them down before gameplay and be like, here is what you know about the world, let me talk to you for 10 minutes?
I would probably give them the documents, right? And I wouldn't give them much more than what's here, because I think people don't really like to read all that much. And it can be kind of intimidating to get all this stuff to read. I would give that to them to refer to, and then kind of have a chat and say, this is roughly what's going on.
Oh, that's interesting. I might do that then, because like we just pointed out there, that there's a different conceit going on between what I'm doing and what you're doing. But at some point, the players will have gathered information. So I might actually make a document with just a list of the information, and to be able to hand to them, as opposed to everyone trying to have to remember. As things go. That's interesting. I for some reason, I just thought it was a no-no to hand out bits of paperwork to people.
I mean, everyone has their own play style.
Sure.
Like that kind of thing can be really good as a prop. Like if they find a letter that has a clue, have a physical letter.
Oh, well, what's your opinions on maps?
Yeah, I would have no problem giving them maps. Also, like if you have a player who likes to take notes, then I would encourage that. Or if you wanted like them to collaborate on like a Google Doc or something, that can be quite effective. We did that for the Janspar campaign. One of the players collected everything and had like a Google Doc. Do you remember that?
I don't, but hang on. Is a Google Doc not a bit kind of immersion breaking?
Like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to refer to it in play, but it's a really good way of keeping track of things and
I don't know.
Communicating outside of.
Man, I think I'd mandate the use of paper there. Yeah, man, like you're in a medieval setting and you feel like, sorry, I need to log that in my Google Doc. Like I'm obviously I'm the tech guy. I love my tech. But in this instance, bits of paper, surely. Tea-stained paper.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. It's different for everyone. I mean, I wouldn't want people to be doing it at the table personally, but if that's how they want to keep track of things away from the thing and have if they want to refresh when they're not at the table, they can go and check it on the Google Doc, and then everyone's working off the same same hymn sheet.
The idea about taking notes live. Sorry, I realize again. Apologies, listeners. We've gone away from Bill's piece and gone into general DMing here. Just bear with me. The thing about taking notes. The first campaign I ran, or first part of the campaign, I was giving them the backstory about how they all came to be there, and it's not really that important. It's kind of a bit of world building, a bit of context. There's 2 or 3 things you might need to remember, but it was funny. They all all 4 of them feverishly took notes.
Oh Jesus! Hold on. Sorry. Stop.
Oh God! What's going on?
So I just I'm on a couch and I just sat to cross my legs lotus style under me on the couch, and in the way knocked my phone off the table and knocked the headphones out of the phone. So carry on.
Okay. That's gonna be wonderful to edit. What was I saying?
Or put it all at the end. Cut it all out. Put it all at the end.
We'll cut everything out. We'll cut the whole 1 hour and 1.5 hours out. No, but what was I saying? They were all feverishly taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, God, if they keep doing this, it's going to be really boring because I'd be all like, you've met Bob in this city. And then they're all like, Bob, what's Bob look like? And I'm like, I don't know, silver hair, short, silver hair, short, race, dwarf. And like, I had to stop literally every 2 or 3 words and wait for everyone to take notes. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to allow them to do that going forward. So I'm with you with the no note taking or minimal note taking at the table. Totally with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's good if in a game I was in before, one person was like really into note taking. I would take a few things, but one of the guys was like took pretty much all of the notes, and he was playing another character's butler, so it kind of made sense.
Oh,
He was
that's
managing the
that's
details.
that's a good in story reason. I like that. I like it.
Um,
Anywho, anything to add on specifically the second and third pages?
yes,
Hmm.
I used a couple of tools to help me frame and develop my ideas about the city. As I said, I've been thinking a lot about gaming recently because I haven't done it in so long, and I kind of miss it. Ages ago, I bought a load of RPGs, load of PDFs, and I was looking through them recently, and the two books that I used anyway was one was the Game Mastery Guide from Paizo, so that's a Pathfinder supplement, and it has a section in it about like developing a city and helping you flesh out the city, and it gives a kind of a character sheet for a settlement, and it gives you space to put in the demographics and the NPCs, like the notable NPCs and locations and adventure hooks and things. So that was quite fun, and it like gave me a framework to look at. This is the size of the city. If I was doing this in strict game statistics, what would that change? And I didn't stick to the format specifically, but it made me think about those things. So it was really useful in that sense. So that was the first one. And the other one I got was, or the other one I used was the Dresden Files RPG. I'm not sure if I think I've talked about the Dresden Files on the podcast before, have I?
I think so. This sounds familiar.
It's a series of books anyway that I enjoy about a private detective in Chicago.
Oh,
Who is a
why is it
wizard.
called Dresden Files? Is his name Dresden?
His name is Harry Dresden, yeah. So he's a professional wizard.
Those words sound so funny. Professional
Yeah.
wizard. Harry Dresden, the professional wizard.
Yeah, he's the only wizard in the phone book. Is kind of a recurring gag in the first few books. And that RPG, one of the books has a big section on developing your own city, so that the players who are playing in the campaign, and not just the GM or whatever, the GM and the players, they collaboratively work together to come up with what themes they want in the city they're playing in. And it has
cool.
a bunch of different approaches. Like you can use your own city. That's the one they recommend, and like find out local legends and kind of rumors and stuff, and build that into like the supernatural element that you're going to play in the game. Or you could like take another famous city, or somewhere nearby that you can go and visit to find things out. But that also gives a framework for developing the people and the locations within the game that you're going to actually be playing in. Now, it wasn't exactly relevant because the focus of that game is kind of you're protecting this city from supernatural threats. But still, it had a framework that I could say, I need to have this many characters, I need to have this many locations to fill in on the sheet. So I'm going to think about that, and this is what I come up with. So yeah, those were two good tools. I couldn't find anything else among the books I had, and I couldn't find. I didn't have that much that was actually directly related to gladiatorial combat. I know there's a little bit in a Pathfinder thing about performance combat and stuff, but Yeah, I'm curious what else is out there, particularly for the developing the city and the developing the districts. If people dig this idea, I might next episode do a little bit more on it, and like develop some of the areas within the city and stuff.
Next week.
Yes, Edgar, next week. Yes.
Just while we're on the subject of recommending things that are like frameworks and like generative things, sci-fi settings, everyone should go check out GURPS. I've used GURP Space loads in my space videos, but GURPS seem to have books and books on everything, and it's a very similar thing to what Bill is explaining.
There is a GURPS Imperial Rome, all right.
There you go. They have one for nearly everything, and I can't speak to all of them, but I can speak about space because I've read that thing cover to cover, and it's great. It's really good. It's really good for like tabletop role building. There's certain things where it's kind of like throw these dice and this happens, and you're kind of like, that's not how the science works there, but that's okay. It's still a really really good framework for generating like planets and systems and all these sort of things. So we'll leave links to all of this stuff in the show notes, and you should go check it out. So anyhow, that little insert aside, have a read. Give us a read there of some of the things that you said on pages 2 and 3.
Actually, no. You pick out ones that you liked. Okay, so I've got a description of the government and stuff, and then I've got some characters. I've got some NPCs. I've got some locations, and I've got some rumors and hooks. So I want you to pick one of each.
One of
that
each.
You liked.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So a character, a location, and a hook.
Oh, a character, a location, and a hook. Well, sure. Okay, character. You mentioned Gasuta.
Yeah.
In the main piece. So let's hear a bit about Gasuta.
Okay. So Gasuta came to Nabeth at a young age to become a gladiator. She has reigned as the grand champion for several years now, and though she no longer competes regularly, she is yet to be defeated in the annual games.
That was a character. So let's hear. Location. Can you read the thing about the Temple of Sands and the Highfield?
Yeah. Okay. So, look, I'll read all three of the big arenas then.
Okay, go for it.
If we're doing two. So these are the three great arenas. The Temple of the Sands is an ancient temple dating to before the city of Nabeth was founded and outside the original limits of the city. The blessed energies here are what give the sacred sands their life-preserving power. It's located in the northeast of the city. The Highfield is located in the north of the city, overlooking much of Nabeth. It alone of all the great arenas stages fights between gladiators and wild beasts, and the owners are always on the lookout for new exotic creatures to use. And thirdly, the Speaker's Arena is located in the southwest of the city. It was built a century ago after a campaign of public finance led by speakers who would go on to be the basis of the modern Tower faction.
The Tower faction being one of the political parties.
Yeah, the Tower faction being one of the political parties. I'll read out the description of the Tower faction. The Tower Party are the party of aristocratic power and tradition. They finance large works to improve the lives of citizens, sponsor many of the largest games, and encourage naval trade. So that's their political stick.
Any reason why you named? Oh, for full disclosure, the factions are the Wheel Party, the Tower Party, the Cup Party. Any particular reason for those names?
No.
No, because Tower is an interesting one, given that they like their naval trade and improving the lives of citizens. It's a very kind of like, it feels like the Tower thing should be almost like a political party that's big on defense and militarization.
They probably would be as well, yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Sorry, the aristocratic power and tradition. That sounds, that sounds fitting with kind of like big big army.
I suppose Wheel, because I'll just read those. I'll read them all out. So
listeners, what we're doing here is we're essentially reading you pages 2 and 3 of the document in a non-chronological order with a lot of what's called sporadic commentary in between. Enjoy.
So the three main political factions in the city are the Wheel Party, are seen to represent the common people, particularly the merchant classes and tradesmen. Their most radical members want to grant positions in the assembly to the other towns and bands under Nabethi dominion.
Oh.
The Tower Party are the party of aristocratic power and tradition. They finance large works to improve the lives of citizens, sponsor many of the largest games, and encourage naval trade. And the Cup Party are the faction of labourers and are supported by many of the ethnic factions in Nabeth. They seek to ensure work for the people of Nabeth and are opposed to punitive taxes.
I can see the Cup Party doing well. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, man. I don't think we should continue to read out page 2 and 3 in a haphazard fashion. I think everyone should go check. Go on. What?
We'll go with one rumor.
Okay. Let's pick the one. Hold on. Let's do the one that starts gossip in the West End.
Gossip in the West End of the city is saying that a great fighter, a champion among the nomads and the outlying forts, is preparing to make a move to the city and start a career in earnest.
We got competition for our party. I like that because of the expanding the scope of the world. There's more beyond the walls of the city. I think that's cool.
Exactly, and all of those little bits that I write, I try and put in something. Like even in the descriptions of the cities, or the descriptions of the the descriptions of the locations and the description of the characters, I try and link those things together. So some of the characters will refer to a location, or they will refer to an adventure hook, or they'll refer to the politics. And like in the locations, the high fields, they're looking for new creatures. So you could fight there, or you could go and get new creatures for them, or that could be the basis of some kind of role playing or some campaign or something, some adventure rather.
So for DMs who are looking to write their own adventures and not necessarily just buying a pre-rolled one, check out the document. I think this is really cool, and it's really concise, at least from what I've gotten used to. Like I have not a huge book, but I have a big book of stuff, and this is 2 or 3 pages that seems to do an awful lot of like an entire chapter in the book that I have here does. So it's good. You should check it out. You should definitely check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Will we move into Green Room?
Let's move into Green Room.
Oh wait, what was it meant to, people were like, it's meant to be called like the Emerald Palace.
The Verdant Salon.
To say it again?
The Verdant Salon.
The Verdant.
That's just my one. That was my suggestion.
I like it, the Verdant Salon. Let's move into the Verdant Salon. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones happened. We're late to the party here, given our schedule, but like, hey, it's a big moment in kind of like nerd culture. So it'll be remiss of us not to speak about it at all. At least that's what I think. So I don't know anything about your feelings towards Game of Thrones at all, Bill. We have not talked off air, and I am excited to see. One, have you watched it? And 2, what did you think? If you haven't watched it, this is going to be the shortest Green Room ever.
Could you imagine?
Did you watch it?
I watched it, yeah.
Yes! Okay, so what did you... let's start broad, right? What did you think about the overall 8th season?
What did I think about the 8th season?
Overall.
It was not very good. It was very rushed, and a lot of it felt kind of ticking off boxes or kind of perfunctory or something.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, and I think the internet agrees too. I don't think there are many people that say that this season is very good. Apparently, I don't remember though. Apparently, a lot of people were saying that it started going downhill like a season or 2 ago, which I don't really remember. But apparently, this was kind of coming. People weren't that shocked. They're kind of like, yeah, it's been happening.
Some of the issues I've had have been there for a while, yeah. But I mean, not all of them by any means.
And it's a shame because like if they had delivered this in a decent manner, in a non-rushed, competent manner, God, like Game of Thrones still is a great TV series, like one of the best. But if they had knocked it out of the ballpark like they did with the earlier seasons, like it would be put up on such a pedestal this series, and it's just such a shame that it just completely died a death at the end.
Agreed.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any particular grievances that you would like to bring up?
Okay, so obvious spoilers from this point.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Let me think. I'm looking at some statuses that I've had here about it. So it was known for its intrigue, right, and like all these like complex machinations and betrayal, and who believes what and how things are going to go, and very, very kind of tightly considered and tightly written intrigue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in the last episode, Sansa goes, "By the way, dudes, we secede," and that was it. That was the extent of the political writing into the North's independence. And I mean, it had been kind of like a thing they had wanted. They were an independent people or whatever, but it was in effect that was all it was. And everyone else just kind of went along with it. Like there was no kind of thing. It was like, we secede, and then the episode ended and they were seceded, and that was fine.
I think you've brought up a point that kind of is endemic of the whole thing, the whole season. Mm-hmm. There's loads of kind of like, it's like, oh, and now this is the case. And it's like, but we didn't spend any time getting there. And, people would fight back and say, well, like, let's say, for example, Arya killing the Night King, which I'm not against at all, for the record. But loads of people criticize that, be like, it kind of just came out of nowhere without kind of like build up. And then people will say, but if you look back, there's been 2 or 3 scenes or whatever where it seems like, it was hinted that she would go all the way and all that. But that's not, for me, that's not sufficient. Like, I think there has to be a more laid out arc. And in the case of Sansa, for sure, like, we really want to see that,
Yeah. And I love Sansa as a character. She's a great character, but just like she was really badly used at the end in that route.
Yeah, for sure.
In that development.
Sansa and Littlefinger, not Littlefinger, Sansa and Jaime Lannister are my favorite characters in the whole thing, and they had been since I read the books. Like, they were just, I've never hated a character more than Sansa at the start of the books, and then had my feelings completely reversed as the books went on. Like, at the start, she was this like stereotypical weak like fantasy princess sort of thing, and it was just
I love that.
But I loved it in hindsight once she kind of turned and you're like, oh, she is really deep and complex. Like, that was class. But at the start, I didn't know that was going to happen. So I thought she was just going to play out as this stereotypical fantasy princess. And that infuriated me. But then it turned and I was like, well, this is really complex. I really loved it. Same thing with Jaime, except kind of in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
But that last scene with Sansa and the succeeding from North, that whole scene was an utter car crash for me, and it just I don't think it needed to be there, and it ended the series on such a what's the word, like mundane and banal note, and like the attempts at humor were just way off tone with what we've just experienced. It was cringy, and the characters weren't acting like real people. Like Grey Worm, for example. Like, why is Grey Worm there, and why is he appealing to this council? Like, he has no. He's
like,
go on.
They ended up leaving anyway. They ended up heading off to Nath, right? Yeah. So if they were going to do that all along, why didn't Grey Worm just like stab Jon Snow? Yeah, no one was there to like exact any kind of justice or revenge or anything on them.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were planning on leaving anyway, so...
Yeah, like Jon Snow has just murdered their god queen, and he's all like, oh, I must talk to the council first. And it's like, what? Yeah. No, like, he wouldn't act like that. There's no way he would act like that. And then like...
Or like, if he was planning on using it for some kind of political leverage, but he didn't do that.
Yeah, it was mad.
And also, the whole thing about them going off to Nath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's where Missandei was from, and it's all peaceful and things. So the army,
I know where this is going.
Probably suffering from like PTSD and have known nothing but war for their entire existence. Like, from childhood, that is all that they did was war. They're going to go off to this peaceful land, and like, how's that going to work? Because they're not wanted there, because that country is pacifist. And if they're like heading off to protect them from slavers, then they're just like imposing a militarism on that country. Like, it was trying to do like this kind of nice ending for the Unsullied, but it doesn't work in any kind of practical terms.
Yeah, for sure. It's like accidental colonialism.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, again, but that whole last thing with everyone kind of going their separate ways, like, why? I don't think we needed to know all of this. Like, who cares? You know, like who cares about everyone's story and how they, go off and whatever. It's just that whole extra, up from the point of Jon Snow killing Dany to the end. It's just like of that episode. It's just like we didn't need that there. That should have been
Mm.
reworked completely. Um, Another thing I didn't like is Euron Greyjoy when he came out of the sea and to fight Jamie. It was like comically bad. It's like Jamie's, the scene. Jamie's like going
Yeah.
to Cersei, or whatever, and he's just like, "I'm here. Hi, I hate you. Let's fight." And it's like, what? Like it's just crazy. And then he stabs him like multiple times, and then Jamie just kind of like you see that he's in pain or whatever, but like he kind of shrugs it off really well for a man that just got stabbed multiple times, and makes his way to Cersei over what seems like a long distance, and when he gets to Cersei, he seems fine-ish, and it's just like
He doesn't seem any worse for climbing like a couple of thousand steps.
right, exactly. After being stabbed multiple times, like, it's just ridiculous. Like it's just I don't understand how they messed it up so bad. Like it's like they
Yeah.
forgot. They just forgot how to write. Like I'm not a writer, right? But I guarantee you I could do a better job. Like it's just like it was crazy incompetent.
And like when the North seceded, right?
Mhm.
How come the other six kingdoms stay together despite like the Iron Islands trying to secede like 3 times in the last generation, and Dorne always wanting independence, and like just the Iron Islands because Yara was pledged to Daenerys, and then there's a different person is actually the monarch now, and she was fine with that.
Yeah, it totally is a case of it was rushed. They just needed to shut up shop and get
Yeah.
going, and it's just none of it worked. Oh, can I ask before we go on? What do you think
Yeah.
of Bran as being the king?
I think it's very, very cool how the transcendent prophet shaman who can see across time and space becomes the king, and everyone only refers to him by the fact that he has a spinal injury. I think that's brilliant.
I mean, yeah, Bran the Broken. Yeah, but the other thing is too esoteric. Like what Bran? Well, I suppose you could say Bran the Seer and things like that. Yeah,
Bran the Sage,
Bran
King Bran. Just call him King Bran. Like
yeah. I think
like they didn't call Robert Baratheon Robert the Fat. They just called him King Robert. Like
Robert the Fat. That's fair. But what do you think of him as a choice for the ruler of the 6 kingdoms?
kind of comes out of nowhere.
It does come out of nowhere.
It does make sense in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, cool, he would be a good king. He can see across time and space. That's a useful thing for a king to have. But it didn't. I felt like they didn't really set it up very much. And why is everyone still okay with him being king if the North is seceded?
Yeah. I like symbolic. Lots of people have lots of problems with Bran being king. I actually don't really mind. I actually think he's one of the better choices, I suppose. But like you were saying, there was no build up to kind of cement that. But I like the notion. Tyrion mentions it, where he's kind of like, in order to move forward, we got to look into our past, and who better than Bran? And I like that sort of that sort of symbolism. I think that works quite well. And it fulfills the criteria of like mentioned the entire way through the season that like maybe Jon would be a better king because he doesn't want it, and like if anything is clear, Bran has no interest in the throne, so it fulfills that criteria. So I didn't think he was a bad choice at all. They just executed it very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
What's your I'm assuming, because you think it's pretty poor, I'm assuming you must have some notions about how you would rewrite it, because everyone's rampantly speculating how you would go about changing this season. Have you any ideas?
No, I don't pretend to be a writer. Other things, stuff other people have pointed out to me though. Arya's the whole thing about stealing people's faces was used precisely once at the very start in the very first episode. Of the season.
Was that this season?
Where she kills
Frey.
Oh, maybe that's the start of season 7, actually.
I think it is, man. I don't think that was in this season. That was before.
Because is the first episode of this season Jon and Dany arriving in Winterfell?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
And she was already there then, I think. Yeah. Okay, so she doesn't use it at all.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out to me it would have been very cool if she had, like, the Night King had been about to kill Bran, and then one of the other White Walkers takes his face off, and it's Arya.
That's not
That would have
bad.
been very cool.
That is not
so
bad.
someone suggested that to me. That would have been great, and that would have used all of the stuff they'd done to develop her character and put it to use. And at the end, she goes off to be an explorer. Where did that come from?
Now, so this is one of those things that people will say, but that's actually foreshadowed. Apparently, there are scenes where she's mentioned, like, I wonder what is west of Westeros, like, and there's some indication that she wanted to do that, but again, it's just not enough to make it a believable sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get that easy either. To be fair,
you know what I'm looking forward to?
No.
I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years of like images and stuff from Game of Thrones being used for all kinds of terrible political memes. Because if not, I don't think this was in any way the intention of any of the writers, and I don't think this is like an expression of any kind of political beliefs or whatever. But if we look at what happens in season 7 and 8, okay, a woman leads an army which is comprised mostly of people who would be read as people of colour in our world, invades a mostly white country, preaching like liberal ideas and liberation and freedom and stuff, and turns to fascism at the very first opportunity. Like, can you see how well that is going to play with certain political crowds?
Yeah, no, it will. That's not
so
great,
anytime any alt-righters want to say that liberals are the real fascists, they're going to have like images of Daenerys Targaryen and the Unsullied to like have as the background there. And I think she's an interesting character, and I think they did something. I think there was something quite good there, and people were very critical of how, like, they threw away 8 years of character development when she tears up King's Landing. I don't think that they did. I think that has all been seeded for a very long time, and it's always been there. It was done. It was executed terribly. It was really badly executed because it was rushed.
Yeah,
but it made sense that she would do that. And she's an interesting character because you could read her as a critique of kind of empty liberalism, or of like very kind of white liberalism, because she preaches this thing of liberation, but it's always centered around her own power. Actually, I wrote a thing about this. I'm gonna find it.
We've gotten fierce political here. I'm really sorry to everyone involved.
No, but I think it is. There's an interesting thing to be. Will I not say this?
No. It's fine. I'm bracing myself mentally for feedback.
Okay, so I mean, I'm obviously a very left person. I think that's fairly clear. And this is a criticism this character, I think, can be read as a criticism of liberalism from a left point of view, not from a conservative point of view.
Right.
But so she talks about changing the system, right? Mm-hmm. But she is part of the system, and she can't acknowledge that she is part of the system. Everything is centered around her own power, and the status quo is central to her power because she's inheriting through her own bloodline. And as soon as she doesn't get her own way, she resorts to the violence that the system has always used. Yeah. So she imagines herself as a progressive character, but she is just a different flavor of the same status quo.
For sure. And that you're right. That is very interesting. That is an interesting thing about her, definitely. I think, if I may, a little bit on Dany, I think she should never have flipped completely. I think she should never have went full fascism and genocide and all sort of jazz. I think they should have continued the trend of dropping hints that maybe she's not all as great as everyone thinks she is. You know, like with she burned the two lads
The Tarleys.
The Tarleys, exactly. Little moments like that where you're kind of, it's very grey and you're kind of like, is she good or is she not good? I kind of wish the show never really did that. And in my sort of vague trying to reconstruct the show, I think what should have happened was, and would have allowed for this sort of character development, is that the battle with the Night King occurs in King's Landing.
Mm-hmm.
So the first like engagement with the Night King's armies occurs in Winterfell. Huge losses are inflicted. There's a retreat. Winterfell falls. The armies of the men of the Westerosi armies keep falling back until they hit King's Landing. They get to King's Landing and they go, look, Cersei, I realize we have these differences. You're holed up in your keep. Night King's here. You can see him. He is coming. You need to help. And then Cersei, out of her own self interests, kind of like opens up the gates or opens the gate, and they kind of the enemy of your enemy is the enemy of my enemy is a friend, or whatever that is. They kind of combine forces, but on the sly, Cersei is kind of like, look, I don't know, Clegane or whatever, or Sandor Clegane or whatever, one of her spies, like, if you get a chance, take out Dany. And I kind of would have liked to seen Dany assassinated in that sort of situation, so we never get to know whether or not Dany turned full fascist. We only have hints that she may have done, and I think that's a cooler sort of like, it means that the story lives on far more in our heads than it does now.
A bit more ambiguity.
Exactly, because now it's cut and dry and we know exactly what happens. We no longer need to ever think about Game of Thrones. But if it was done something like that, we could, you and I could come back in 2 or 3 years' time and continue to speculate about what might happen. Like, I think that's a bit better.
That's interesting.
Certainly the thing about the Night King falling in Winterfell was just the most anticlimactic thing ever. Like, you have the big bad, like the sort of demonic undead, and they fall midway through the season, and you're left with the sort of housekeeping of like, oh, I guess we should take King's Landing. It's just so anticlimactic because everything's exactly the wrong way around.
I think there's really interesting storytelling possibilities there, and I can imagine something very effective there that they did it, and they kill this supernatural threat, but that doesn't change the fact that they still have to deal with the human threat. And I think that could be done really effectively, but just something about it fell flat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds effective, but I think on screen there's no way of doing it without it being anticlimactic. Because he's so much bigger than the human threat. Like, there's no way of selling it without being kind of like, oh yeah, and then we need to do this afterwards. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But certainly I think that if you are to take out the Night King, which obviously were to happen, I think it needs to, as is the problem with much of the season, it needs to happen over a much longer period of time. Like, almost do like a reverse Jesus here, in that the Night King has to like seemingly fall a couple of times before he's actually destroyed, but kind of taking him out on the first sort of pop is kind of like, well, that was horrifically anticlimactic. We need to see more losses and to build him up even more as this invincible dude, and then against all odds we come through after a long and bloody ordeal with him, but this idea of just kind of like rocks up to Winterfell, Arya stabs him, he's done, move on, it's just too quick.
No, I agree that there needs to be something, or that there ought to have been something more shape to it. Also, and this is one thing that I thought for a while, the battles in it were always so bad, so like implausible and badly done.
Do you mean strategically?
Yeah.
See, now this is interesting. Again, I don't know much about military tactics, so maybe it's easier for me to accept this. But when I heard that they coordinated the battles terribly, I was always kind of like, well, what's wrong with that? Like, I mean, humans make terrible decisions, and like in the case of Winterfell, like if you're facing an army of undead, maybe that might cause decision making to go out the window somehow, out of like stress or fear or.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that up to a point for sure.
Up to a point.
But like, I mean, yeah, but I don't think anyone's going to like sending the Dothraki charging into like in the dark, charging into the army of the dead as the very first thing in the battle. I mean, that's beyond foolish. Like,
oh yeah, but Bill, rule of cool.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that's that gives a different explanation for it. It doesn't make it less
Yeah,
bad.
I know, I'm joking.
You know, there's
Sorry,
you
go
know
on.
the old saying.
Maybe.
The old saying that the best defense is not wasting your elite shock troops on a pointless frontal assault at the very start of the engagement.
Oh, I love it. That's brilliant. I mean, but it doesn't matter in this case
Dumb
because all the Dothraki came back, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's how did the Unsullied like provision themselves in the months it took to assemble that council where Bran became king and North seceded? Like, they were in a bombed out city. All the food had been taken from the surrounding areas and presumably had been destroyed. How did the Dothraki eat?
Yeah, there are problems, Bill. There are major problems.
But like, okay, even other than the Battle of Winterfell, like the Battle of the Bastards was absurd. Like, it was beyond ridiculous. In how that played out, and the previously unknown phenomenon of when you shoot a load of people with arrows, the corpses assemble themselves into hills.
I see again because again I don't know very much about battles. I thought looking at that, and perhaps I'm being naive. In fact, I almost definitely am. I thought that was like a more realistic depiction of a battlefield because at least in my head, from playing like video games and stuff, battlefields tend to be very clean. Do you know, like, you know, you'll kill someone and they'll disappear because it's a game.
Yeah.
And I was like watching that, I was kind of like, maybe that's what battlefields are actually like. Like, these corpses will just pile into these unnavigatable hills, and the terrain becomes really difficult. So for me, actually, and it might be entirely wrong, but it kind of increased realism for me.
I don't see how they'd actually form into hills, though.
I mean, if you keep killing them in the same spot, surely they would just like.
But like, people aren't just going to keep climbing the same spot where the other guys are getting shot.
Oh yeah, you're going to get like a single layer, one or two people deep.
Yeah.
But they won't. That's fair. No, that's fair. That's fair. That makes sense. Yeah. Now that you pointed out, Bill, thanks for ruining that battle for me.
What I did like about that battle was that it was confusing, and the way it was shot was messy and like difficult to read. And I thought that was like a really appropriate level of confusion. I guess, you know, it was. I thought that was very effective.
This is still the Battle of the Bastards, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you say the same thing about the Battle of Winterfell in terms of the confusion and the way it's shot?
Not particularly. I thought that was all right.
Okay, I thought it was shot horrifically poorly. And it's talked about ad nauseum on the internet, but like, everything's so dark, and like, we were watching it on like a 5-year-old computer with like not the best screen, and if you try and do that, it's like, it's proper hard to watch. And I'm sure if you have loads of like cool modern tech and like a massive, like, 50-inch OLED television, everything might be fine. But like, if you don't have that, it was not fine to watch. There was loads of like, what happened there? I don't know what's going on.
I watched all of season 7 and pretty much all the rest of season 8 on my tablet, which was very, very dark, and there were a lot of scenes where I couldn't see what was going on. But I had been pre-warned about the Battle of Winterfell, and I happened to be in my parents' house, so I just got up really early in the morning and like pulled the curtains and turned the brightness up to maximum on the TV, so it actually ended up being okay.
Oh, interesting. I still think that's a bad call on their part. Like, shouldn't need to do that to be able to watch the TV. A final thing, because we're over time a little bit. This shock horror for us. Do you? What are your like expectations with regards to the books? Do you think Martin will crank these things out before he dies?
I've no idea.
Are you holding out hope, or because I'm
hoping. I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see how he does it and in what way it's different. I know he said something to the effect that the result will be the same roughly, but the journey will be different. So
I mean, and that's largely the problem we have with the show. The journey
that they were
poor.
locked into an ending.
Yeah, exactly. I don't hold out hope. Like, I've been watching loads of interviews with him, and I'm kind of like he's not the youngest man in the world. One thing for one, and two, he doesn't look like the healthiest man in the world, and I'm sure all the stress of like having to like be involved with a show, at least previously, and then writing these books and doing all the other things, they can't be good for the health. So
he does a lot of other work. Like he he writes other things. He's working on other TV shows, like some related, some unrelated.
Yeah, so I think this might go a Robert Jordan sort of thing. I think a manuscript might need to be passed to someone else.
That's not going to happen, he said.
Oh, did he say that's not going to happen?
He said no one else is going to finish it. If he dies, he dies.
Oh, he better not die. Oh no, because I really want not to be all like, oh, we're left with this piece of crap TV show, because honestly I don't care. I think it was fine. Everything was fine. It was grand. But I just want to see. I want to see it come from him because it's his brainchild. Like I want to see how he would have finished it. You know.
I do want to point out, right? We have spent a fair bit of time talking about this. But in general. And like this is I've been talking about this because this is the topic that's come up, and it's relevant to the podcast and stuff. I haven't been spending a huge amount of time thinking about this, and I think it's really weird how people are like obsessed with hating on the show.
I need to talk about this too. Yeah,
similar things happened with every Star Wars film that's come out in the last 5 years, and people like obsess over how much they hate it. And like, you don't have to like it. I wasn't that big a fan of most of the Star Wars films. But, like, you can not like something and just move on with your life.
So, this is, I have felt this way with this, because I've watched loads of people complain about it on, like, YouTube and things, and it's, like, it's uncomfortable watching how upset they are over this TV show that like they can just choose not to watch. And the thing that made it even more uncomfortable for me is that like I saw myself in them, like particularly when you said with Star Wars, like I was really angry at The Force Awakens because it breaks my rule of make new things. And I kind of, as I mature into a 30-year-old, finally, I've kind of come to terms with this. I'm just kind of like, there are some media that would be good and some will be bad. If bad, think about why bad, just, as a sort of intellectual exercise, and then just move on.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to dwell on it. And in dwelling on it is just really bad for your mental health because you just get angrier and angrier and sadder and all this sort of thing. And like, that's how I feel about Game of Thrones. I think previous Edgar would have been hugely upset about it, but now I'm just like, we had 6 or 7 great seasons. We had this not good season at all. Here's all the reasons why I think they're not good. Here's all the things I think that would have done could have been done better. I eagerly look forward to some books to see a different perspective, and then just kind of leave it at that. I have touched on this cultural milestone, and I'm fine.
Someone asked me about it yesterday and said, were you happy or unhappy? And of that binary choice, I guess I'd say unhappy, but like, I wasn't actually invested enough to feel happiness or otherwise at it. It's a TV show that I watched that I didn't think ended that great. That's cool. I'll watch something else now. That's done, and I can do another thing.
Exactly, yeah. And again, I want to make clear I'm not being judgmental of people. Like if you are listening and you have gotten very angry about this, that's you do you. But it's more that this has caused me to self-reflect and change the way I was. So it's a very, I'm looking at myself here, not others, sort of thing. But yeah, so in summation, I suppose, overall Game of Thrones was great to watch. The last season was a bit lacking. But still, all in all, it's still a triumph of television.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And until next time. But we do need to wrap up. So
we do need to wrap that up there.
Do you have a last thing you'd say or anything?
No.
Okay, not. So thank you to everyone. The usual, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the show on Patreon. And if you happen to go look at the merch, a link is in the show notes over on Teespring. Thank you so much for buying merch as well. It helps us do our thing, and it means a lot to us. We will see you next week.
See us tomorrow.
We will see you in 3 hours for more Artifexian fun and games. Until next time, Edgar out.